She was a queen like no other, powerful, ruthless, and feared. A master of manipulation, she brought an entire nation to its knees and sealed her own fate. Jezebel, the Sidonian princess, turned Israel against their God, leading them into idol worship, deception, and bloodshed. But the God of Israel would not be mocked. A prophecy was spoken, and a gruesome fate awaited her. Her rise was legendary, but her fall was horrifying. If you are new to this channel, subscribe now and uncover the shocking truth behind the dark legacy of Jezebel, the queen who dared to stand against the God of Israel.
The story begins in the sun-baked hills of ancient Israel. During the 9th century BCE, a foreign princess made her way toward the city of Samaria. Her name was Jezebel, daughter of King Ahab of Sidon, and she was about to become one of the most notorious figures in biblical history. The marriage between Jezebel and King Ahab of Israel was meant to forge an alliance between two powerful kingdoms. But Jezebel brought more than political connections. She carried with her the deeply rooted beliefs of her Phoenician homeland, particularly the worship of Baal and Asherah. Her arrival marked the beginning of a spiritual battle that would reshape the kingdom of Israel. She didn't stop there. Under her direction, the traditional altars to Yahweh were torn down, and those who remained faithful to the God of Israel found themselves increasingly marginalized. The prophets of Yahweh were hunted down, forced into hiding in caves and remote valleys. One man dared to stand against her, the prophet Elijah. Jezebel was no ordinary queen consort. She possessed a fierce intelligence and an iron will that quickly transformed her into the true power behind the throne. The biblical records paint a picture of a woman who didn't merely influence her husband, she dominated him. Within months of her arrival, temples to Baal began rising across the landscape, their angular shadows falling across the land like dark fingers. The queen's first major act was to establish hundreds of prophets dedicated to Baal and Asherah, housing them within the royal court itself. Their confrontation on Mount Carmel became the stuff of legend. Jezebel's prophets of Baal, 850 strong, gathered to challenge Elijah in a divine contest. Hour after hour they called upon their God to send fire from heaven, dancing and cutting themselves in religious frenzy, but no fire came. Then Elijah stepped forward. His prayer was simple, direct, and the response was immediate. Fire fell from heaven, consuming not only his sacrifice, but the very stones of the altar. The people fell on their faces, crying out, "The Lord, He is God." In the aftermath, Elijah ordered the execution of Baal's prophets, dealing a devastating blow to Jezebel's religious revolution. But Jezebel was far from finished. When she heard what had happened, she sent a message to Elijah. "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them." The threat was so credible that Elijah, fresh from his triumph, fled into the wilderness. The queen's influence continued to grow. When her husband Ahab desired a vineyard belonging to a man named Naboth, Jezebel orchestrated a cruel plot. She arranged false witnesses to accuse Naboth of blasphemy, leading to his execution. The vineyard fell into royal hands, but this act of royal overreach would have far-reaching consequences. Jezebel's power seemed absolute, but forces were gathering against her. The prophet Elijah pronounced divine judgment not only on Ahab, but on his entire dynasty. After Ahab's death in battle, their son Ahaziah became king, but his reign was short. When he died after a fall, another son, Joram, took the throne. Then came Jehu, a military commander anointed by one of Elijah's disciples to destroy the house of Ahab. As he approached the palace in Jezreel, Jezebel received word of his coming. Her response revealed both her pride and her indomitable spirit. Rather than flee, she painted her eyes with kohl, arranged her hair, and dressed in her finest royal garments. From her window high in the palace, she called down to Jehu, comparing him to Zimri, another military commander who had killed his king. It was her final act of defiance. At Jehu's command, her own servants threw her from the window. The biblical account states that her blood spattered on the wall and on the horses, and Jehu drove his chariot over her body. When Jehu later ordered that she be buried because she was a king's daughter, little remained. Dogs had consumed her flesh, fulfilling Elijah's prophecy that dogs would devour Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. All that was left were her skull, her feet, and the palms of her hands. Jezebel's death marked the end of an era in Israel's history. The temples of Baal were destroyed, and worship of Yahweh was restored. But her influence had left an indelible mark on the kingdom. The period of her reign became a cautionary tale, a warning about the dangers of abandoning traditional faith and values. The story of Jezebel continues to captivate audiences thousands of years later. She represents a complex figure, a strong woman in a patriarchal society, a devoted adherent to her ancestral religion, and a queen who wielded power with ruthless efficiency. Her name became synonymous with wickedness and seduction, but her story is more nuanced than simple villainy. In the end, Jezebel's legacy is one of cultural and religious conflict, of power and its abuse, and of the consequences of attempting to fundamentally change a nation's spiritual identity. She remained true to her beliefs until the end, facing death with the same proud defiance that characterized her life. Whether viewed as a villain or a tragic figure, Jezebel's impact on Israel's history was profound and lasting. The ruined temples of Baal that once dotted the landscape of Israel stood as silent witnesses to her ambitious attempt to reshape a nation's faith. Though her body was consumed by dogs, her story endured, a powerful reminder that the struggle between competing beliefs and values can shake the very foundations of a society. In the annals of biblical history, few figures loom as large or as controversial as Jezebel, the queen who dared to challenge the God of Israel.